Betsy and Thomas here for the American Intelligence Media. Thomas, the phone has been ringing. My email's going nuts. People want to know what you have to say about the Mueller indictment of Manafort.
That's it? That's your whole question?
Yeah, well, because I've already heard a little bit of what you're going to say, so I know I just need to step out of the way and let you go for it.
You just know I'm going to say, I told you so,
yes,
everyone out
did.
there. Exactly what has happened is exactly what I predicted. I am the only person who predicted that. We wrote the discovery reports from the Anonymous Patriots, the intelligence reports on Mueller, to point out that Mueller was driving Comey. Comey is a bad version of Mueller. He's his protege. He never really made it to being a master. Robert Mueller is a master. Therefore, we know what he was going to do before he came in. As a matter of fact, I could talk all day about this because this is the most perfect example of the archetype of the way that type of Department of Defense and FBI, CIA evil works. It is obfuscation, complete and absolute. Make sure you go and read the indictments. And make sure you have some popcorn because you're going to laugh your rear off when you read these. They're written on maybe a fourth grade level. They are not written as an indictment. Any lawyer who would look at this would laugh and say, what are they doing here? This is a propaganda piece, both of the indictments of Manafort, Rick Gates, and the other one, which actually started back in July when they arrested him, George Papadopoulos. Now, those two separate indictments, because Mueller and Gates are clumped together, when you get to the released part, and first off, they were released, well, then that invalidates the entire thing. They were released ahead of time, that invalidates it.
Yeah, it's
every
like,
leak invalidates it. It has to end.
When I was opening up the news today, Thomas, it was like, how do people know this by dark 30 in the morning?
Well, I do want to give Robert Mueller one pat on the back. Bob Muleface, I just want to say that you did a good job arresting George Papadopoulos in July because no one knew about that. In other words, we said that they would go after Mueller, and they would go after Mueller for tax fraud and tax evasion and for...
You mean Manafort?
Manafort, excuse me, what did I say?
You said Mueller.
Oh, no, I wish that was a Freudian slip. I wish they'd go after Mueller. I wish Larry Klayman would be supported and he would become the special investigator against Mueller himself.
Yeah, when do we start getting our folks in to start taking down that criminal cabal?
Oh, well, you see, what's happening is Pete Bharara,
yes, over there in New
who
York,
is out there tweeting saying, oh, good, now they're going to turn Manafort against Trump and leverage him. So be ready because we believe that they've already turned George Papadopoulos and that this is just the beginning. He's crooked, okay? Andrew Weissman, who Mueller recently, the last lawyer that Mueller added to his team of 17, was brought over from another department and for criminal division because he had already been going after Manafort since 2002. 2002, folks. That's how long it takes them to complete an investigation because they're really not very smart people. But anyway, seriously, since 2004, because the first election of Yanukovych, they were going after Mueller to say, how come he is controlling Ukraine?
Not Mueller, Manafort.
I keep saying Mueller. Sorry.
I know.
I just want him to be
We all want Mueller to go down.
Sorry.
We got it. Okay.
Paul. I should just shorten their names, okay? Rick and Paul and Bob and Rod. That's really what's going on.
Don't forget Bill and Hill.
This is an old boys club. These are bunk buddies, okay? They need to go to jail because all they really want to do is spend time with each other as bunk
all they're
buddies.
doing is obfuscating, and they're just drawing this out so that we really don't look what's going on with Uranium One.
Now, Mueller, my biggest disappointment was when Trey Gowdy, for the second time I heard him say that he believed that Mueller was a straight guy. Mueller is as corrupt as he can be. Let's begin with that. Crooked as a dog's hind leg. 911, Mueller. Okay? He didn't plan it. He covered it up. That's Mueller's job. Fixing and covering up. Same thing as Comey. So every time there was a leak from this special counsel's grand jury impanelment, it should have put an end to it. But it didn't. We've had leaks on everything except George. Why? George is the lowest hanging fruit. George Papadopoulos, let's work with him first and what happened with him. Some of you might not even notice this because it's hardly talked about, okay? Because it's so sad and so pathetic that when you read that indictment, you're going to laugh. And I'm going to tell you what's in the indictment because this is pathetic. All of the emails, 20,000 emails were given from the Trump camp in complete transparency to the Mueller investigation. Well, they called in George Papadopoulos, like many others, and they questioned him, and then they charged him with lying to them, falsehoods, and omissions. Omissions, folks? So if you miss saying one thing that was in the emails that you turned over willingly, and as George Papadopoulos was a volunteer, he came forward willingly, he could have pleaded the fifth. He never had to say a word. He could say, see the emails, that's all I have to say. I plead the fifth. No, he and Manafort and I didn't realize Rick Gates had been called. Another thing I should say, well, that's one thing that didn't leak out. But Rick Gates is his, if you see one, you see the other. They are always together in the campaign. They were like Jesuits or like Jedi warriors. They traveled in two, Templar knights. Those two are awesome. I'm going to talk about how awesome they are in just a minute and what I predict is going to come from all of this because I doubt anybody else is going to predict what I'm going to predict. And I want to say also, when I said, I told you so, I was speaking to members of my own conclave. They disagreed with me.
Yeah, you didn't say it told Betsy here. Because I was right
Betsy
on board with
me.
you. Right.
But the conclave members...
You know who you are.
You know who you are, all of you. You dissented
That's right.
when I said this and harped on this, and so I had to every time qualify that it wasn't the Anonymous Patriot saying it. It was Thomas Pain in the Butt, who keeps saying things that turn out to be true. Anyway, because why? You use simple logic, folks. You don't believe... If you turned on and watched CNN or any mainstream media during this, and you had 5 seconds of exposure to their alarm frequency, you are alarmed. Don't listen to even 5 seconds.
You have to turn your television off.
As they say, cut the cable.
I try to give you so much content on Truth News headlines that you don't have time to turn on the television.
I certainly would never.
I know you don't.
Never. And because why? It influences me every time, even though I know the silent subliminal control methods are coming through the screen for the Democrats and not for the Republicans. With the Republicans are evil things coming through. With the Democrats, it says, look at Hillary. She's beautiful. She'll be the first woman president. Everyone bow down. That's what is coming through the screen every time she speaks. Right. Otherwise, if you listen to her words, you realize that she's never said anything ever.
Okay, Thomas, back on Manafort.
And Mueller. Okay, so we said this from the beginning. Now let's just go back and give a little... No, George Papadopoulos we're working on. They got the lowest hanging fruit. They scared him to death. He's the youngest member of the Trump team on foreign affairs because he was with the Hudson Institute. He's a brand newbie right out of college. He's only had 2 short jobs, and he came on the team. He never talked to Trump. I doubt he even reported to Carter Page, who also was on that team and never talked to Trump, who was also mentioned in the Trump dossier. Was mentioned in the Trump dossier. George was not. And once, when George got tricked by someone who in the indictment they call the professor and a Russian woman into believing that the Russian woman was a direct relative of Putin. So poor George Papadopoulos, this should be made. The reason he already put out an offer to do a book is this will make you cry when you hear this story. It's his first job. He's over in England and he's in Italy on vacation and some professor approaches him. He becomes fast friends with him even before he's on the Trump team. Okay, set up. Anybody see a setup coming here? And then that professor says he has contacts with all the top Russians, all of them, straight up to Putin. And get ready, folks. Hang on to this horrible
This is really
fact.
sounding like a great spy novel.
Oh, this is the greatest. Hang on. This professor has direct access to Hillary emails, thousands of them that have dirt on Hillary. Well, George Papadopoulos says, well, I'll go for that. And so then the professor introduces him to a pretty young girl. And then that pretty young girl says she is Putin's relative. And then later he contacts and he gives all the emails to Mueller. He had all of them. And then the professor says he contacted a Russian high authority. And that high authority had some emails back and forth with George Papadopoulos. And George Papadopoulos said, hey, I want Putin to meet Trump.
He's a young whippersnapper. He thinks he's going to make things happen.
And so he even reports that to everybody. I met this really cool dude. He knows everybody. And this woman who is a relative of Putin's. Hey, do I get credit when Trump meets Putin before the election to show that really Trump wanted to become Putin's friend, much like Hillary and Obama and Larry Summers and all of the Democrats were already friends, right? Don't forget that.
And no, but they want you to.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. They want you to forget that. But Trump points it out in his tweet. Don't forget
He's
Hillary
a tweet master
and the real collusion with the Democrats and the DNC hiring of Fusion and the opposition research that went straight to the Kremlin.
Okay, let's go back to George.
I'm sorry, these stories are so good. I'm like getting in a spy mood with all this.
I know, but
I'm so excited. I was a spy. Ooh, I love Cloak and Dagger. Anyway, so going back, George Papadopoulos believed this horse manure, told his bosses, and they went, yeah, maybe. And then after the third time he bothered them, they said, hey, Trump is going to meet with NATO before he meets with Putin. Shut that up. That's the end of the story, folks. But because everyone is cooperating with Mueller instead of pleading the fifth, which they should do, because they should know a tricky son of a gun like that, and 17 other lawyers, especially Andrew Weissman, who is the number one D.C. lawyer who invents evidence, and then later his court cases that he wins are appealed because of the invented evidence, and he still is not disbarred. Andrew Weissman, look it up, folks. Criminal, absolute criminal. And don't forget, and here's the most important part when we go to Mueller. Well, we won't go there yet.
Of course, no.
We won't go there yet. Don't you want to ask some questions about poor Georgie Porgy? Like, did Georgie Porgy get fired for this? No, they laughed at him. Did he ever get a meeting with Trump? No, he did not. Could he have created Russian-Trump collusion? Absolutely impossible. End of case. But it should have taught everybody Mueller's crooked. He's there for the fix. He's there to cover up and find anything he can. And that's what happened with Mueller and his poor assistant, Rick Gates. I feel very sorry for Rick Gates because he was trying to be just like his boss, Paul Manafort, one of the most powerful men on the earth. We'll talk about him in a minute. So anyway, don't forget, we should call it the bogus Mueller investigation. He is already colluded with Comey, made through his agents public statements and leaks galore, and it should have been closed down a long time ago. But the most criminal thing that he did, Mueller, and the reason it should be closed down, and this is just disgusting, he impaneled 2 grand juries. Anybody ever wonder about why he impaneled 2 grand juries? So that he could have jurisdiction over the criminal corruption cases that were being investigated by Preet Bharara and Andrew Weissman and the current New York Attorney General Eric Snyder. They hate Manafort. They want Manafort. They know he's crooked. They've been going after him. But can we jump to Manafort? I'm so excited.
Yes, please.
Here's who Manafort is. Is anyone pointing this out?
Well, you did in your last audio. If anybody was listening,
if they read the intelligence report, they'd know this.
Well, like some readers are beginning to see, or listeners, I should say, that the things that you are saying are coming true.
Oh, it's so easy to see. This is standard operating procedure with the usual criminals. These are the same people doing the same thing, and if you are so stupid you don't read or understand or listen to history or see through the lies, which is our task of our day, and I'm sorry to say that so cruelly because people are stressed out, but don't be worried, folks. We're winning. We're winning because Mueller is showing his hand. And as we've said again and again, with the Trump effect, people attack him and they rebound with equal but opposite force. He's like a kung fu master. He's a qigong master. Or I studied judo. It's all about using the energy of the opponent against them and letting them fall on themselves and using their own body weight to crush themselves.
You know Putin is a master judo, whatever they call that.
And he's KGB. There's not a word out of his mouth that's the truth. Anyone who ever believed that is a complete fool. But he's a great leader if you see him for his limited worth as the top mafia oligarch of a country that's been attacked by America and disassembled, ripped off, and fleeced repeatedly by the same people who are still doing it, the very people we're speaking about, or at least protected by these people. So Mueller's investigation is complete nonsense. We suggested that he might go after Carter Page, and he still may, because Carter Page literally worked in Russia. George Papadopoulos wanted to be a Carter Page. He wanted to live in Russia and get the Russian deals with oil, because if you're the one who can raise a sanction or put a sanction on, it's worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and that's the reason the Podesta Group is lobbyist, and Paul is usually Democrat lobbyists, but they also work for Republicans. The Podesta Group, John and Tony Podesta, and that's the reason Tony Podesta is stepping down from his company, because he knows he's in hot water. He too was questioned. He answered the same way everybody else. They cooperated with Mueller. That's foolish. You don't cooperate with that counterintelligence evil man. He's a lawyer.
You do if you're already a snake in the pit.
Only if you're innocent. I'm going to tell you in a minute that Manafort is completely innocent.
Okay.
But nobody's going to hear what I'm going to say. I'm like Cassandra. Listen. I predict things,
yes, you do.
But people can't hear them because they're so shocking at the time. They can't believe it.
It's like
but they remember it for the rest of their life. They go, hey, that crazy Cassandra sitting outside the temple said this.
I know, it's like the conclave when you told them about Manafort in the beginning. They just totally repudiated that idea.
They said they were going after Michael Cohen because Michael Cohen had been proven to go to Prague. Lie. Michael Cohen in the dossier is accused of going to Prague. He never did.
Okay.
That was completely debunked. Oops. They tried to say Carter Page was the middleman. Carter Page said, no, you don't have any records that I've gone back and forth to Russia. I'd love to go to Russia. I would love to get Trump a deal with the oil, lifting the sanctions and getting the oil flowing through Ukraine and getting Russia paid and Kazakhstan paid. I'll make billions myself. I'll make my percentage. That's what Carter Page was saying. That's what all those oil baron young dudes trying to help Trump come up with a Russian plan, because he had to write a Russian foreign policy plan. Is the most important issue on the table. Unfortunately, he didn't get very adept people except Paul Manafort, which we'll come to in a minute. Now, so Carter Page. No, they can't get Carter Page on much of anything, except Carter Page did not file, exactly like Tony Podesta did not file. Oh, that's right. When Mueller interviewed Tony Podesta, he accused him of not filing as being a foreign agent. The same thing that's in the indictment for Paul Manafort. Oh, that's right. They let Tony and John file retroactively as agents immediately thereafter. That's right. I forgot. Oh, by the way, that was in the news. All news. So that everybody would know that they're completely legal, straight up dudes. Oh, no, wrong. Tony Podesta lobbied for Russia and went to the White House during Obama's time 114 times with special access through his brother John Podesta, one of the chief counselors of Obama. And basically the person who gave the list of most of his appointees, exactly as he'd done to two presidents before that. John Podesta is the kingmaker. Paul Manafort is the kingmaker. Paul Manafort put crazy backwoods Jimmy Carter in as president as a Walt Disney production that was paid for by BCCI, the Pakistani bank where the CIA and the Pakistani intelligence and all the crooked intelligence and mafia do their banking throughout the world. That was found out. Everybody knew that. No one wants to talk about the fact that Jimmy Carter was completely corrupt by who? Paul Manafort. After that, oh, by the way, where did Paul Manafort learn this? Well, you'll catch this one because it's so topical. Next, who did Paul Manafort put in the White House? Ronald Reagan, another Walt Disney production. An actor who had been governor of California, who changed his own party. Who changes their own party and becomes the president in modern day age? Unless you're just showing that you're, Trump did. He was more a Democrat. His whole family's Democrat. He became his own party. Let's really remember that's the Trump party. That's not the Republicans. Anyway, he backed Reagan. Ho! Bing, bang! Reagan is in there. Who did he back next? the most evil man in modern day American history who is alive, who's being protected by the redactions in the JFK releases, and that would be George H.W. Bush, who at the time of Kennedy's assassination was actually a CIA agent, very well known to be complete deep cover for Zapata Oil, which were outposts for the CIA in their Bay of Pigs attack. He basically was the money behind Mongoose. When they realized they could do that, they created a dummy shell company that could run money from Mexico into elections that would then give Mexico things like, down the line, NAFTA, good trading deals. So Bush became the money behind Nixon. And Nixon was chosen out of thin air by Harriman himself to be his candidate, and that was supported through George H.W. Bush's laundering of money from Mexico into presidential elections. This has been going on as an absolute institution since Paul Manafort started it with Jimmy Carter and showed how easy it was to make a president as a Walt Disney production. It's about a popularity contest. Has nothing to do with anything else. As long as you can hide their background, you can make anybody, like a Boris Yeltsin. The CIA made a Boris Yeltsin. They can set up a regime. Saddam Hussein was taken out of prison in Egypt and taken to Iraq and installed by the CIA. Let's remember, Al-Qaeda means the list, the FBI list of trained people in Afghanistan, trained by our own CIA, and that's where, of course, Bin Laden comes from. He's simply a Saudi Arabian prince who has been trained by the CIA to fight against Russia to keep the poppy fields open, flowing for the CIA. So we have to remember these are all very standard things. And of course, Mueller and Comey are protecting the CIA. They have to. They're all one intelligence community. They all get their source of information from the NSA. But now they're in a war, and that's why all this is happening. Anyway, so remember who Paul Manafort is. Then he made George H.W. Bush, the most evil president, who basically instituted the idea that once you've been president, you then work with people who have been in the intelligence community, especially the CIA, and you're backed by their companies and by their stolen gold that was stolen assets after World War II. And you basically, the world is your oyster at that point. You got the tiger by the tail, and you can't stop it, George H.W. Bush, to this very day, okay? He is still the evil behind 9/11 that if you just simply read our intelligence reports, the absolute proof is there. All we need is get a Robert Mueller out, get a Rod Rosenstein out, get an Andrew McCabe out, get a James Comey out, get the evil ones out who've been doing this since the early 90s in complete impunity to our laws, because why? They're working for the White House. The executive branch is, just like Trump says, should just be cut down. He should basically just, I heard someone say the other day, a very reputable person, the Department of Justice must just simply be closed and reopened because it is lawlessness that is going on there.
That's a good idea. You know, a lot of entrepreneurs do that when they walk into new businesses and they know it needs a big change. They just shut down whole departments, give everybody a termination, and then start anew.
Trump is their boss. He can fire all of them.
Fire them all.
He could just be an executive branch of one if he wanted.
Probably get more done.
Okay, and he'd get more done.
Well, no, it's true.
Precisely.
I mean, look, Betsy and Thomas can figure this stuff out, and our 17 intelligence agencies and the Department of Justice, where are the indictments?
And we have to go to our huge conclave to run this by them to see if we're right.
The conclave that doesn't even say you're right.
When we're right before they even get to tune
right.
in. You know, that's the reason we use the image of Odin Frigg sitting there betting on what's going to happen in the future. And
now, say those words. You said them very quickly. People will not
You explain that.
No, it's just Odin and Frigg. We sit here and we look out at the world and we make predictions with one another of what's going to happen next. Or we look at history, we look how we got up to this point here, and we just look at the trajectory and see what's the next play, and that's why we're so accurate.
It's the ancient Norse mythology, very deep. If you read our stories, you can connect into that. Very, very deep stuff. But anyway, Going back to this, it tells you how we do this, okay? It tells you how we do this. It tells you how we are able to figure this stuff out.
And Frigg.
Shh, don't tell anybody.
Okay.
They have to go figure it out themselves, the Glass-Steagall game. Anyway, where was I? Ranting and raving about Paul Manafort. Paul Manafort then created George H.W. Bush. Then after that, he basically was the the Republican opposition research company in Washington, the number one lobbyist. And he worked with Roger Stone. Don't forget that that's who Trump first chose as his campaign manager, Roger Stone, till he went nuts, as he often does. And then he went to Paul Manafort during the time. And let's just reiterate this. You think I'm making this up. I'm sure Wikipedia will tell you this. Just Google it, folks. I don't make anything up. All you have to do is look at history. I'm a historian. That's all you have to do. So if you don't believe who Paul Manafort is, you in America, you're not going to believe what I'm going to tell you about what he did in Ukraine. And basically, he took on the entire Russian empire and won. I mean, this is who the man is. You don't mess with Paul Manafort. So if you think you're going to take him down in a stupid lawyer trick of having him agree to testifying before your stupid, what have I called it? Invalid, improperly run and leaked piece of junk that he calls his special investigation, then let me just tell you what Paul Manafort's going to do. Okay? Real simple.
Cassandra, lay it on us.
I said this basically from the beginning. I'm the only person I know that says this. Who do you think Paul Manafort's lawyer was during the whole time that Andrew Weissman and Eric Snyder and Preet Brahuha, whatever his name is, they wanted him, they salivated. They tried again and again. They couldn't get it. And so why? You want to know why? He used the most corrupt lawyer firm in the world, WilmerHale. That's who Mueller just came from. Mueller just came from WilmerHale. Paul, I got to step back from the microphone. I'm going to yell this so loud. Okay. Did they do the first tiny bit of vetting of Mueller, who comes from WilmerHale? He was working at WilmerHale when he came to be the special counsel. That's who was representing Paul Manafort.
Oh my gosh!
How many times have you heard me say this?
Oh, well, I know, but it's like now it all connects.
His lawyer firm cannot prosecute Paul Manafort. This was known from the beginning. You think Paul Manafort's lawyer didn't know that? So you know what Paul Manafort's lawyer did?
What?
And I said this too.
What?
The second that they ran into Paul Manafort's house to seize documents, what did I tell you? What did I tell you that they went for? The only thing they didn't have, because everything had already been turned in. And then I ranted and raved about the Treasury Intelligence Department knows every single offshore transaction, every transaction in the world. How do you think, folks, they're always able to know the exact amount of those wire frauds? Movement from offshore accounts, whether they're in Delaware, in America, or wherever, they're always known by the Treasury Department once they have a FISA warrant. Oh, that's right. Every single offshore account, or certainly everyone outside of America, they don't need a FISA warrant. It's an international transaction. So when they went after Manafort, they keep harping about his offshore accounts in Cyprus and other places. Manafort, as I said from the beginning, has more offshore accounts than they will ever find. They have just found $75 million in what they call slush funds, but they don't state that it's in the very accounts that he lists. And I'll tell you why, folks. Because if they really went to those offshore accounts and they found out who put money in there, it would be the very people investigating them. If you don't think Paul Manafort was paid off before this happened, you are incorrect. He gets paid off for everything. And let's remember, they keep saying he laundered 18...
Wait. Okay, wait a minute. Are you saying that Mueller would have had an understanding of all this before he moved in to be special counsel, and that we're being played by Manafort and Mueller in this?
Absolutely.
Okay.
You want to know how it goes? I'm going to go back to what I just said. I'll go back. You remind me if I didn't say this.
So we're being played. Does Trump know this?
We were played from the moment that Mueller got extended by Obama as the head of the FBI until Comey got his last tens of millions from HSBC and from his hedge fund. And then he became the head of the FBI after Mueller, and then Mueller went right over to HSBC, where Comey had also just arranged a plea bargain so they didn't have to pay $4 billion, and then they only paid some millions. Just look at their history. Okay, now, I told you from the beginning, and I think I don't know if you rolled your eye, but I can tell you that I claimed this was my personal opinion, not the conclave's opinion, but I said from the beginning.
Forget the conclave. We're just going to stick with you now, Thomas.
No, we do not forget the conclave.
All right.
$100 million is what I predicted was put in offshore accounts outside of this country for Comey for him to take the position of 10 years of being the head of the FBI. Think this through. At his last job, he was making $10 million for doing nothing. Why would he take a job that makes $140,000 a year or whatever, $160,000, $180,000, I don't know, under $200,000 a year? Why would he take that job? Because he's fixing things that are hundreds of millions of dollars where he then gets his kickback and it all goes into offshore accounts. That's why he fought so bad and why in the end he made so many mistakes and in the end he perjured himself so that in the end he can plea bargain down to a perjury that he committed. That's what's going to happen in the end if he gets caught. And the reason he made those tweets when he was out in Iowa, he was saying, if I go down, everybody goes down. Don't forget that. Mueller's there to cover up everybody, not just himself and his Uranium One deals and every other collusion. Any collusion since he became the head of the FBI is as clear as the nose on my face, and I have a prominent
But listen,
prominent
Thomas, I mean, just look at the list of attorneys that are on this team of special counsel. And when I look at that list, I see they're there to clean up stuff.
They're all Democrats. They're all Hillary cleaners. They figured Hillary would be the president, and then it would just be open. Absolutely, I don't even know
they
the
would
word
have just
for
shut
it.
us all down.
No, well, they're all draining us, you see.
Yeah.
They all have their own greed channel. It's all a matter of flowing money. It's like an Andrew McCabe who had all the money flow not only from Hillary's super PAC to his wife, Jill, when she ran for office in Virginia. Now, let's remember, who is on the Clinton Foundation? Oh, that's right, Terry McAuliffe, who is the husband of Jill, who ran for office where he's the governor so that she could take over his job. I think she wanted to be senator, then she would have been the governor, okay? So this is what they do. Where did the money come from? And I said this from the beginning. It just absolutely blows my mind, and I must admit there was dissent. I said Fusion GPS was funded by Hillary's super PAC. That's exactly what happened, okay? How did I know that? Because she also funded Jill McCabe. And then when that money came in, then Terry took state funds, about $250,000 or so, and donated that to her campaign. She didn't use all that money. She pocketed it, and that's how they laundered the money. Okay? Now, they had infinite money. They only do this because they're so chintzy, and that's why they always get caught. Same thing with Manafort. If Manafort gets caught, it's because of the following. He did real estate deals of moving money from his offshore accounts, which were not in America, which was his problem. He should have put them in Delaware. He should have gone out and got that money in cash and brought it back. The money he made, $17 million. What they're going after him for, they don't say in the indictment. The indictment is silly. When it comes to the charges, they don't tell you that. It's blank. When they show you the story, it's written in a 3rd, 4th, 5th grade level so that you, the reader, the people, the mainstream media are trying to approach to convince that these are criminals for their criminal actions that had something to do with Trump. It's written for you. There are explanatory notes. Never in history has there been an indictment written like this. This is written almost by the same people, it sounds like, who wrote the Trump dossier. It is written by 5th graders on I can tell you a million ways that Manafort can get out of this stupid indictment. And here's the number one way. When they went to his house with guns drawn in the middle of the night, I told you, they already had all the documents. And any offshore documents aren't there. There's only one thing that's there. His attorney-client privileged conversations with WilmerHale when he knew they were coming after him once he became Trump's campaign manager for 2 months. And don't forget this, and this is what people forget. He was only the campaign manager for 2 months, and that was during the time that the Electoral College said they were not going to vote for Trump. They all came out with a dozen ways that their constitution of their Electoral College in their state gave them they could vote their conscience, and they're not voting. We had entire congregations. The entire Electoral College of entire states said they were not going to vote for Trump. Do you remember that?
Yes, no, I do.
They went there. What happened? Every one of them stuck to what they were supposed to. Not one dissenting Electoral College vote. And if you remember, George Soros said...
He had him in his pocket.
George Soros said he had him in his pocket, and his words were, when he was asked, who's going to win this election? He said, Trump will win the popular election. But don't worry, I've already taken care of that by paying for millions of dollars of ads to win the electors, he called them, to win the electors or the Electoral College members. So he had already believed that his campaign ads, which he paid for, and also remember Paul Singer, who's now accused of being one of the donors for the dossier, he paid millions of dollars through his group for negative Trump ads.
Now, didn't the FBI have an obligation to tell Trump when he was running that they were having problems with Manafort and whatever? I mean,
they did. That's where I was going. Thanks for bringing me back.
Sorry. I didn't know you were going there. But it just seems like...
I forgot where I was going.
The FBI's playing Trump too.
Okay. They came to Trump 2 months after Manafort became his campaign manager and said, we have 5 investigations on Paul Manafort. Now, Trump obviously didn't vet anybody in his Trump team. If they were willing to jump on that train, or a ship that looked like it was going down,
the deplorables,
he said, "Jump on." He took everybody,
yeah.
And that's the explanation for all of this. That's why he had these people on his Trump team. Did they ever talk with him? Most cases, no. Carter Page never spoke to him. George Papadopoulos never spoke to him. The 2 low-hanging fruit that they went after, which I predicted was going to happen, but they got his attorney privilege client WilmerHale files. They apologized, and then they gave them back. And I said at that point, they cannot prosecute him because what they did was illegal. They seized and they took them out of his house. That's what they went for. And I told you, when they went there, I'm sure they didn't disturb the house. They only went there for one thing.
Well, if we're being played, maybe that was part of the whole setup.
Comey was paid, in my estimation, at least $100 million for what he was going to do to protect Hillary for those years. Mueller, of course, he was paid. Mueller is worth more money than anybody knows. All of a sudden, he left his government job and he was worth $40 million the next year. He's paid in 1 year $40 million, $35 million, and they say it comes from his investments in a hedge fund that you have to have $10 million to join. Well, he didn't even have $10 million at the time that he joined that hedge fund. He was the lawyer for them. But now he reaps benefits of $30-40 million a year. Oh, yeah. And Mueller went back to WilmerHale. Why would a man making that much money go back there? Because it's the most corrupt, most powerful legal institution in the world, and that's the reason they were asked to come in. Why Rod Rosenstein is in bed, always has been. He is a protege of Robert Mueller. So it's a fake investigation. I told you they would never go after the real criminals. I told you they would never call in the real people, and it didn't matter if they did. They have already been able to seize all their stuff. This is a national security, international security, counterintelligence investigation. Don't forget the word counter, because counter means lie. It means propaganda. And that you even know it exists means it is not what it says it is. And that's what they consider it. That's what they've called it over and over again. James Clapper, everyone. Counterintelligence. This is a counterintelligence. Why they believe that the Russians broke into our election. Lie. If the Russians are Russian Today, RT, and Sputnik, the 2 networks, okay, yeah, well, Russians really affected our election. Wrong. We have shown recently in releases that Hillary Clinton spent $700,000, not $100,000 like the Russians on some stupid ads from Russia Today and Sputnik. No, she spent $700 hiring...
$700,000.
$754,000 in 7 installments. Using a government agency during her election, she used U.S. taxpayer dollars to hire Facebook to write what she called a template for winning the election. And it was a Russian programmer who is well known and works with Google who wrote the program. So yes, there was a Russian involved in America and meddling in the election, and that was Hillary. She used Facebook, and that's why Mark Zuckerberg came out. Fakerberg. He did not invent social networking. That's a complete lie.
Fraud.
Anyway, he came out and with this distraction. Also, at the same time, the Global Engagement Center admitted that they were doing that during the election and that they were putting out those false ads, and then they all quit. The head of the Global Engagement Center from the Board of Broadcasting Governors and his 3 IT guys quit. Why? They were all implicated. Everybody's implicated. Everybody's got their piece of the pie. So, yes, Carter Page was wrong to hope that, by being an aide to Trump's campaign, he had been living in Russia, that he could get a piece of the pie. He might not have filed as a foreign agent. Yes, George Papadopoulos did not tell the complete and absolute truth, but if you listen to the words that he said, he downplayed it. He told the truth, and it's a lie that he falsified it. No, he didn't. And he only omission? He's charged with omission? When was anyone ever in a grand jury trial ever charged with omission? And by the way, no one's ever been charged with not filing with as a foreign agent. No one has ever been charged with that and been prosecuted. So that's complete nonsense. Conspiracy, Manafort and Rick, conspiracy. You know what's conspiracy? Because there's two of them. They will not get a Russian to admit that they conspired with them. They have no evidence. There was not one speck of any evidence in either one of those two indictments except what we had said, that he was not careful and he gave some of his money to his relatives. And that's what is shown in the documents. And look at the documents. The documents say it was a real estate deal in New York. They turned it into Airbnb, and then he told his daughter to play like she lived there. Oh, they brought money from an offshore account into America, and he would now, to get out of these charges, have to prove that he paid taxes on it. That's not so hard to do for a man who basically structured the campaign fraud for 3 presidents and made sure that Yanukovych got elected in Ukraine once they had already had an Orange Revolution supported by the CIA and Obama himself, who said that he, in fact, supported with money $1.4 billion was given to George Soros and CIA non-government organizations to cause the revolution against Yanukovych in Ukraine in his first time that he was in office, and that was called the Orange Revolution. They don't want to go near there. Because you know who worked for them then? That's right, the same who worked for Yanukovych when he was re-elected after that revolution. And they said the Russians spawned the revolution. No, they did not. Obama admits he spawned that revolution. And guess who he put in place at that time? Sorry to have to say it, Yanukovych was a Nazi. The Party of Regions, it was a continuous party that had supported the Nazis since the Nazi times, killing Jews, murdering people by the hundreds of thousands. Same party still exists today. Yanukovych came the head of that, and guess what? We didn't like that because he was going to be too big of a Nazi boss. So there was a Soros paid for, CIA paid for, American paid for, Obama admitted revolution in Ukraine, and Yanukovych was thrown out during the Orange Revolution. Okay? At that time, what they wanted was the oil pipelines going across Ukraine to Europe not to end. And that's what the sanctions in Russia are about. It has to do with that oil, and Hunter Biden sits on the biggest oil company in Ukraine. After Manafort brought him back to the presidency after there was a revolution against him. And then what happened? He, at the end of 4 years, he said, I'm not going to go with Europe and the European Union. I'm going with the deal with Russia. Instantaneously, we went into and murdered people during the Euromaidan Revolution, where people were shot by snipers from the roof as they were peacefully demonstrating in a square, as they had done before and won, but only with Soros, CIA, and U.S. support. Billions of dollars, by the way. Yanukovych was then, all he said he was going to do was align himself with Russia because they offered a better deal. Boom, he was out. He went to Russia. He's been there ever since. Then they said Manafort supports Yanukovych and his Russian connections. Yanukovych never had any Russian connections. He never made the deal with Russia. Manafort didn't do that. And then we know for a fact, because it was admitted, because she's not an American, but she's a Ukrainian, and she works on the Democratic National Convention in the Atlantic Council. Alexandra Chupla admitted that she was the person who went to Ukraine and created fake, now listen to this, folks, because this is what Manafort is accused of, created fake ledgers that showed he got $27 million personally into offshore accounts. Those ledgers were found to be false, and she was shamed. We haven't heard from her since then. But she also at that time accused Manafort of taking hundreds of millions of dollars into offshore accounts to hide it for Yanukovych and the 3 men who were his top ministers. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Am I boring you yet?
No, I find this fascinating.
Well, get ready, because the next part is going to blow your mind.
Okay, but it takes a lot to blow my mind now, Thomas.
No, this is going to blow your mind.
All right.
Are you ready?
Give it to me.
Because of what was going on in Ukraine, and the whole balance of Europe and its oil supply hung in the balance. And because the United States sanctioned Russia because they went into Georgia and Dostotsk and another province and the Crimea, and they were going back into these countries, and they said that they were invading them. There were votes that were taken by the populace that said they wanted the Russians back. The Russians went in. And yes, they went in with their tanks because they knew that Ukraine wasn't going to be happy about that. But it was an autonomous province, just like Catalonia. Don't we all feel sorry for Catalonia in Spain? Oh, don't you want the rich people of Spain not to have to pick up for the poor? That's what's going on. That's what's going on in these areas. When you have all the wealth, you simply break off, and then your friend owns it. And that's what's going on in Ukraine. When Ukraine broke off from the USSR, it turned into a mess like all of the satellite countries until a powerful regime was put in place, either supported by Russia or supported by America. It's as simple as that, folks. We were in Azerbaijan, and George W. Bush was in Azerbaijan, still there. The CIA's headquarters is in Azerbaijan. That's why they fly out of Silkways. That's why all those weapons were delivered to Syria on Silkway Airlines. It's the CIA. George Bush is still there. Cheney's still there. That's where the Vulcans were. This is all history. Just read our intelligence report.
Yeah,
it's very simple. You cannot hide from history lawsuits and the money that you made, paid, or was tracked by the government. No. That's all you got to look up, folks.
If the timeline is long enough, truth eventually is shown. And this is a very positive time for us because more and more truth is coming to the surface. But I want to go back now.
Well, wait a second.
Mueller. Okay,
wait, no, we can't get there yet.
Okay. Because
what do you see Joe Biden doing?
Oh, Joe Biden.
Standing with the newly elected after the overthrow of Yanukovych in Ukraine, you see our people standing there on the stage with them doing what? The Nazi salute, folks. The Nazi salute is still used in Ukraine by Nazis, and that is who Antifa is. Okay. And they use their very symbol and use
what picture are you talking about? What picture are you talking about?
A picture of Biden standing on the stage.
I saw him with Lady Gaga, covering his butt for maybe years ago.
Years ago.
All right, well, you have to frame it.
All the Americans rushed over there to get their piece of the pie with the oligarchs of Ukraine that were being cheated by the carpetbaggers of Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers and all these groups that go in and write deals to take what is national and turn it into private. That's what happened in Russia. That's why the oligarchs need to understand what America is going to do, because if we put sanctions on them, they could lose hundreds of billions of dollars. So the whole battle in Ukraine is about oil and about whether Americans get the oil instead of the Russians. It's real simple. That's the reason the Baltic One, the pipeline running from Russia through the Baltic Sea and on into Europe, they wanted to add a second one, but oh no, Obama's last sanctions ended that. It ended Russia's ability to give Europe as much oil as they need, that they get from their own satellite countries, because they are simply oligarchs placed there by a Russian mafia oligarch, Vladimir Putin, who I have tremendous respect for. I know he's a criminal. I know what he's going to do before I ask him. So he's easily predictable. He's easy to deal with. China, that's another question altogether.
Well, don't go to China because, when people open up a YouTube video and they see that it goes beyond 20 minutes, they just don't have the time for that.
Well, this is about U.S. democracy. Let me explain what's going on here. If Manafort goes down, so does Tony Podesta, so does John Podesta, so does Fusion GPS, and so does every single oppositional lobbyist group that uses offshore accounts. Even when they're in Delaware or Utah or Montana, it doesn't matter. If they use offshore accounts to receive payments from foreign agents and then foreign countries, and then, or they call it foreign capital, or foreign nations, or people in those nations, so that it would influence them, especially when they have a job with the government, you see. That's called emolument. Every payment that Hillary Clinton received while Secretary of State, she must receive the full penalty for that. Almost $2 billion. Every one of those, well, it wasn't quite that. It was about $1 billion during the time she was Secretary of State, but now they've got $2 billion illegally. So, every dime that she got from a foreign country during the time she was Secretary of State, she has to go to jail for. Simple as that. Every single email that went through her server, she has to go for jail for. Anyone who knows anything about the security clearances you sign knows that. Why isn't she going to jail? Because if she goes down, the rogue White House ex-president club falls.
Well, the sad thing is here, we've got a lot of pressure coming from patriots all around now, saying Jeff Sessions, where are the indictments? But then on the other hand, coming from the other side, you've got so much pressure on Sessions and the DOJ not to do anything. So I see this little bottleneck. This bottleneck's getting ready to pop wide open.
Here's the deal. Jeff Sessions is old school. Done. No politician stabs another politician. Et tu, Brute. You don't kill Caesar. Caesar's a man. You don't have to kill him to see if he bleeds because you believe the PR that he was a god. That's what Hollywood's for. That's why I call it Hollywood presidents. They're Disney World presidents.
What are you talking about? How does that relate to Jeff Sessions?
Jeff Sessions is old school. He's not going to take Hillary or anybody else down.
No, he's not going to take anybody down.
No.
He's just going to sit there and just try to make sure that the police can come in and seize your property before you even have a chance to defend it.
I'm going to make this real clear.
Don't smoke marijuana or what?
I'm going to make this real clear.
Whew, earth-shattering.
I've said it before. Get this. Understand this, and you will understand Washington, D.C. There is no such thing as a career politician without an offshore account. Let me repeat that.
You mean even Jeff Sessions?
There is no such thing as a career politician who doesn't have an offshore account. Don't be stupid, folks.
That's why we need term limits.
Don't be stupid. That only started to end with the Panamanian Papers. And who came out in there? Fusion GPS was mentioned all through there. They're representing everyone illegal and criminal.
That's why they don't want their bank records saying, hey, Thomas, let's wrap this one up.
Wait, no. Hedge funds. The only thing that they're going to get Manafort on is not $75 billion in a slush fund. First off, that an indictment would use the word slush fund makes me laugh until my sides split, and then I want to get up and slap to the ground the idiot lawyer that put in quotations, slush fund, and never once defined where that money came from, where they get the number 75 million, or in any way show any transactions whatsoever between those accounts except to show what we showed, which was he blew it. He wired money instead of getting it cash, and he used it for his own family's real estate purposes.
Thomas, what can we expect next?
That's tax fraud. Listen, wait. George Soros owes $19 billion in taxes for his offshore hedge fund account. Why aren't they going after him? You know how many offshore accounts Mueller and Comey have? No one knows, but they have to have them because they're the experts at prosecuting them. They know how to work them better than anybody. So when I describe to you Paul Manafort, the second most powerful man in Washington, D.C., John Podesta being the first. Why is John Podesta the first? He has blackmail on everybody. Why is Manafort the second? He's got the dirt on everybody. His job is to get the dirt, keep it in a file, and use it. That's why he walked into those electors, and whoever the head of those electors were, he simply said to them, I will personally take you down if you don't do exactly what I say, and they did it. And not one single person stepped out of line. He did the same in Ukraine. He does the same in Russia, because remember, he is also a lobbyist in Russia. Now, the part I didn't finish is he had a company called Mercury LLC, and they worked two of his companies. I can't remember the name of the other one. Everybody, I thought, knew this, because when the European Union's group for a moderate Europe came out, it was found to be a fraud. They had no money. It was founded by the three Nazi heads of Ukraine, not Yanukovych, not Yankosovich, or none of them. The three heads who are still there now own that company, and it still operates. And what did they do? They use it for lobbying Ukraine, and it's been so successful. It's astounding how successful it's been. And so they put the money in an offshore account. That's the $2 million in Cyprus they're talking about. And so they're saying that he had control of those bank accounts. No, he did not. Paul Manafort did not have control of these bank accounts. This has already been proven. But who were the other two companies, or the number one company that made 1.3 million in one year and 1.5, I believe, in another year, representing Ukraine through this bogus group called the European Committee for a Moderate Ukraine. What that means, let me translate, that means a lobbyist words for, we get the oil in Europe. That's all that means. That was a group that was working for the European Union, probably in a very underhanded way, to try to get Ukraine to go with the European Union so that they'd get a better deal on oil. It's as simple as that. They were actually saying, this is absurd. They were saying to Ukraine, a Nazi nation, a nation of horrible fascists, fascist oligarchs now in a pre-Soviet Union satellite country going insane, and we're going to offer them NATO protection and then put nuclear bombs in Ukraine on the border with Russia? Is that really what we're going to do again? How many times are we going to threaten Russia? Anyway, so let's remember, those are American powerful people getting their piece of the Ukrainian pie, but they also are getting their piece of Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan and every part of the satellite countries of the USSR. So Manafort was doing that. But folks, think who this Manafort is. Look at him walk, look at him talk. For some reason, you believe him. I wonder if his pockets aren't lined with gold like a devil, like a forked-tongued devil. I mean, this man has so much influence and power. No wonder Trump, on Roger Stone's suggestion, went with Paul Manafort.
Thomas, I want to know what's next. What will we expect?
Michael Flynn will be charged with not filing as a foreign agent. Okay, which he did not, and he admitted he did not, and admitted that he didn't have to because they were our ally, and he was actually not doing anything wrong, and he wasn't lobbying, whereas Tony Podesta was lobbying.
Yeah, but can they give Flynn and all of them the same deal they gave the Podestas and let them file retroactively?
No, they're not going to let them file retroactively.
Why? Because
they're not their friends.
Exactly.
This
so
time.
It's like right,
because these all guys work together and turn on each other like rats.
All right, and then what happens?
What's going to happen to Manafort?
Yeah.
Manafort, the only thing that's going to stick is tax fraud.
I mean, will Mueller be finished with his investigation, or is this just going to go on and
on
and on?
He only threw this out to counterbalance the uranium one and the fact that he's as guilty as anybody because he delivered the uranium to Putin himself.
That's great. Because
under a diplomatic immunity.
That's right.
So that we could sell that uranium to Putin, we had to prove how good it was, and Mueller himself delivered it.
So we can have Larry Klayman come in and be special counsel to investigate the special counsel.
And Rod Rosenstein, for 10 years, was conducting the case of fraud, money laundering, extortion of our own nuclear power plants by Russian mafia in the United States of America. And we didn't tell anybody. That's right. We didn't tell anybody. Rod Rosenstein didn't mention it to Hillary Clinton, who was looking at whether we'd give 20% of our uranium, or in Wyoming, which you hear the left wing say was bad uranium. It was so bad uranium that in 2016 it provided 11% of our uranium in America. Can't be too bad a uranium. Plus, then also, don't forget, this is one of 3 times that Hillary Clinton allowed this mafia boss to come here and take over our uranium industry. They allowed them to take it to Canada. We're allowing them to take it out of the United States of America? That has to be approved. Yes, it was approved. So they take it to Canada and they enrich it through Frank Geistra. I'm not even sure how to say his name. Giustra. Who is a best friend of Bill Clinton's. And then they refine the uranium, and then, lo and behold, they have to have another vote at their Homeland Security Council to say whether they can bring it back into America. And then they allow them to bring it back into America. Then there has to be yet another meeting of a whole different group of people who are going to allow them to truck it around the United States of America with a bogus Russian company out of Paducah, Kentucky, probably not meeting any of our nuclear standards whatsoever. Enriched in uranium, just floating around throughout every place in America, to every atomic corporate nuclear reactor, buying our nuclear uranium from Russia. How is this even possible when Canada has the second largest holdings we could buy from them? Australia has a huge holding we could buy from them. Why would we need Russia to go to Canada to enrich the uranium to bring it back to us? because this is a huge fraud, folks. It's been going on since the time of George W. Bush and the megatons for megawatts program, and Bill Clinton got on board, started his own foundation to get his piece of the pie, and right now Uranium One is George Giestra is getting a piece of the pie, as well as we now know, because of this fraud investigation that went on for 8 years. They allowed it to go on to practice the fraud for about 6 years before they busted them. This is allowed to happen here in America at the same time that we're allowing all these votes to happen. And by the way, it was Obama himself. It doesn't matter that Hillary was on the CFIUS committee, the Committee for International Foreign U.S. Investments, right? The president must sign off. Barry Soetoro, Barack Obama signed off of the Uranium One deal. Don't let anybody pin it on Hillary. She was doing what Bill had been doing for years.
We got plenty on Hillary.
Yeah.
But this one goes to Obama.
Hillary got the $145 million, you see. Mm-hmm. So that was a whole other thing. But the extortion, the racketeering, and the RICO, and the basically just unbelievable Putin in bed collusion, giving a Russian oligarch power in America, almost untold power. And at the same time, just so happens that the FBI found 10 Russian spies in America. One of them said that she was just an inch away from having direct access to Hillary Clinton. They picked all of them up when they said that and sent them back. So what else is going on that the FBI is allowing? It is a corrupt organization. It needs to be redone, and Jeff Sessions needs to go take a nap. And we need to get Rand Paul, and maybe his father, and maybe Christie, and some other really vicious people to go after these evil people.
There, but they are not going to have a shot until we clear house. So, Mr. Trump, close them down, tell them they're all fired, and let's just start this department up fresh again.
Now, I said to an IRS person the other day that how can they get this money out of the country? And how can they get it to hedge funds? How can the hedge funds send their money offshore, and 65% of the wealth of America every year, the GDP goes offshore? He says, well, you got to catch them. So in the case of Manafort, they're trying to catch him. Here's the deal with offshore accounts. Everybody knows how they work. You just have to have fake signers, fake heads, and this and that. And Manafort may or may not be charged at all for that stuff. But if they do, they got to go after Tony Podesta, who was the number one person funded by the European Committee for a Moderate Ukraine. Let's look at the truth. Let's look at what Trump has said. Let's look at the Democrats and Hillary. Let's look at the Uranium One. Let's look at Mueller himself. Let's look at Comey. Let's look at their collusion that goes back to the early 90s, which is so thick that just by circumstantial evidence, they should be locked up.
And this not stop, and let's go all the way back to 1960s and get that George H.W. Bush where he belongs.